Right guys, last night BBC did a Panorama programme on the PCR testing facilities, or one in particular, although I shouldn't really say testing facilities, it's more like the lab that processes them. Well, that story there deserved a video in its own right, but more so when I noticed that BBC Breakfast this morning did not even mention this Panorama investigation at all. Now, I guess I should say, for those who are hoping the BBC would blow this whole thing wide open, I say slow down. You got more chance of Labour taking a tough stance on immigration or being patriotic at this point, which means you've literally got no chance at all. But what they are essentially doing here is showing anyone who watched it that lockdowns have at least in part been based on dodgy testing data, something we have known for a long time already. And that is simply because the PCR test is not designed for this purpose before we even get into the false positive rates admitted by the government ministers months ago. But it now seems you can also add to that the testing procedures that make contamination of samples almost guaranteed, or should I say the handling of tests, because it's not really the testing itself that's being done, it's when they're messing around with the vials that get sent to them. The best way I can put it is it's like everyone pissing in a bucket and trying to find out which one has chlamydia or something like that. Clearly worth the £37 billion the taxpayer is footing for this complete shit show. Now, from the BBC's Panorama show, evidence at the lab captured by the BBC actually shows checks to ensure samples could be identified were rushed, meaning tests were sometimes discarded unnecessarily, or it would seem quite often. Naturally, costing the taxpayer more and more money, and people who get told to self-isolate while they wait for the results, therefore ending up costing them even more money than their taxes alone. On top of that, some test samples glooped across an area where other samples had been placed, naturally risking contamination. Now, while I'm obviously not a lab technician or anything like that, even I know a sterile working environment is vital, especially when dealing with a potentially deadly pathogen. You know, surely these labs and technicians would follow that if it was the case. Next up, they captured in their film swabs used by people to take the tests were left in the tube when they were being processed, presenting a further contamination risk, which once again goes back to how labs should be operated for obvious reasons. But as you will see in the clip that I'll show you in a moment, they literally didn't do this at all. And then on top of that, we also had a quality control scientist telling the reporter that the quality of the results progressively got worse throughout the day, which possibly means the people working there got lazier and lazier and more careless as time went on, just sitting there counting down the hours until they could go home. And in fact, as you will hear shortly, it seems most of them were actually sitting there just twiddling their thumbs for a lot of the time. But apparently now, following this Panorama programme, the findings have led experts to question the way the lab was operating. Well, no shit, Sherlock. I actually hope at this point everyone is questioning the way they are operating and everything related to these tests. If it's happening in one, it's happening in more of them, let me tell you. And actually, for all we know, it could be happening in literally all of them. We don't know, and we likely never will. At this point, I consider us lucky that we got any information on this from the BBC. I'm sure most of you would agree with that. Though, like I said, it's not really enough, and they should be doing a hell of a lot more to call out the government on this. But anyway, enough of me talking for a minute. Let's see a couple of clips that the BBC posted earlier, despite not talking about this on BBC Breakfast for some reason, as I said.
There is almost zero question that this would lead to contamination.
Oh, look at that gloopy.
Some of the samples are quite thick and gloopy, and the machine is dragging them across what's supposed to be a clean plate.
Oh, did you see that?
If a gloopy sample is positive and it contaminates the plate, it could mean people being told they're positive when they're not, having to self-isolate when they don't need to.
I think it was just a bit gloopy. Oh, there's another one. Oh. Had a lot on this one. Look at that gloopy boy. I think a swab carried across.
Oh, you can just like take it off the tip, you can just like knock it back in the tube. Like, it's not really clear, as long as it doesn't go on the plate.
What can we do? I feel like a lot of the other new people have been really sticking to themselves. Oh yeah. What just happened? Was it fine?
Yeah, it just went back into the test.
Terrible. beyond terrible. Very surprised that it's been allowed to get to this low level.
What you're seeing here is just absolutely crazy. It's crazy. That there is almost zero question that this would lead to contamination. Every time there's a point of contact like that, there's potential for contamination. As soon as you see that, just stop the system, find out what is going on, because there's no point in carrying on with those samples because the chance of contamination is just so high.
I think a swab carried across.
Oh, alright. You can just like pick it off the tip, you can just like knock it back in the tube. Like, it's not a big deal, as long as it doesn't go on the plate.
This is disgusting.
This is the bit that just perhaps shocks me just more than anything else that I've seen. If that solution has got a full infection in there of millions of particles and you start bouncing this around, naturally little droplets are going to spray off in all different directions and they're going to go into all the neighbouring tubes. This is not okay.
Well, there we had the footage from the BBC's reporter Jackie Wakefield, who worked 18 shifts undercover in January and February to investigate this. She joined one of 4 teams of technicians preparing and processing PCR test samples and apparently cocking them up. Though I doubt she would have been responsible for doing that, she was literally just filming it to see what they were doing. It said apparently they can process 70,000 tests per day, but while she was there, it was usually between 18,000 and 40,000. So despite being in the midst of the second wave of a pandemic, the lab technicians the reporter worked with sat idle for significant periods of their shift, which obviously speaks volumes to me. I don't know about you guys. But apparently it also said that technicians were working to targets regardless of the number of samples arriving in any 24-hour period. Which makes me sit here questioning why you would give people targets in a not-for-profit testing facility. It seems very strange, unless of course it comes from the government contract itself, literally demanding targets are put in place and actually hit. I wonder why they would do that. But like I said, while this won't blow the shit show wide open, it should make a few more sheeple watching the BBC wake the fuck up and smell the bullshit that's being spoon-fed to them like a bowl of fucking cornflakes. At this point, I think that is literally the best we can hope for. Bread comes from the media that might make people wake up and at least question what they're being told. Common sense and critical thinking has completely shit the bed like Labour's election campaign in 2019. But on that note, guys, I'm going to end the video there, so make sure to check out the channels linked down below if you want to follow me on Odyssey, BitChute, or any of the other platforms linked down there.